30 minutes after I swore I didn't have a child, a little girl with my eyes looked up at me and whispered, "Mommy, Evelyn?" I remember the way the word hit soft, innocent, and somehow violent, like it had been waiting all day just to split my life in two. I always thought my life was simple. Quiet shifts at the auto shop, greasy hands scrubbed clean at night, cheap takeout eaten in front of a muted television, and an empty apartment that never asked anything of me. The kind of quiet that isn't happiness but is close enough that you stop questioning it. That evening I'd just kicked off my boots, half listening to the rain on the window, when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost let it ring out. I don't know why I answered, maybe boredom, maybe instinct, but the moment I put it to my ear, a frantic woman's voice exploded through the speaker. "Miss Carter, your daughter has been left here for 2 hours. You need to pick her up immediately." My body went cold in a way that didn't match the heated apartment. "My daughter," I heard myself whisper, stupidly, because my brain couldn't catch up to the words. "I don't have kids, I'm single, there's no daughter." Her tone sharpened like a ruler slapped against a desk. "If you don't come now, we'll have to call the police for child neglect." I should have laughed. I should have demanded to know who was pranking me. But something deep inside me whispered that this wasn't a mistake, and as soon as the call ended, I stood there staring at my phone like it had spoken in another language. Disbelief can feel physical, like a hand tightening around your throat. I didn't move until the silence of my apartment became unbearable. Until it felt like the air itself was pressing me toward the door. A daughter? My daughter? What kind of cosmic joke used my name like that? I grabbed my jacket and rushed down the stairs, nearly tripping over my own feet. The cold Seattle air slapped me the second I pushed outside, but it didn't clear the dread blooming in my chest. My fingers fumbled with my keys as the questions spun faster and darker. Who would use my name? Why my number? Why did they have my address? And the worst question of all, why did a child somewhere believe I was her mother? Traffic was wet and angry, headlights smearing across my windshield in streaks of white. I drove too fast, ignoring horns, gripping the steering wheel like it could anchor me to reality. In my head, the woman's voice replayed on a loop. "She's been left here for 2 hours. We're calling the police." By the time I turned into the nearly empty parking lot of Pine Brook Elementary, my palms were slick with sweat, and my stomach felt like it was dropping through the floor. The school building loomed under dim streetlights, quiet as a closed mouth. It looked nothing like the place where my life was supposed to detour into something monstrous. Inside, the hallway was deserted, fluorescent lights humming overhead, my footsteps echoing too loudly in the emptiness. I reached the administrative office and lifted my hand to knock, but the door opened before my knuckles touched wood. A woman stood there, stern, tired, and visibly annoyed, the way people look when they've been forced to stay late because of someone else's failure. She looked me up and down and asked, "You're Miss Carter?" My mouth was dry. "Yes," I managed. "I'm here because you think a child here is mine." Her expression softened slightly, but not enough to be kind. "She's inside," she said. "She's been crying for you." The words landed like a physical blow. Crying for me. I swallowed hard and stepped through the doorway, and that was the moment my life split cleanly into 2 parts, before I saw the child. And after. She was sitting on a chair that looked too big for her. Small shoulders hunched, clutching a worn, stuffed rabbit so tightly its ears were bent out of shape. Her hair was dark and messy, like she'd run her hands through it 100 times to keep herself from falling apart. When she lifted her head, my breath stopped. Those eyes, brown, glassy, trembling were my eyes, not identical, not perfect, but close enough that something inside me cracked open. The administrator cleared her throat behind me, saying, "She hasn't eaten much. She kept asking when you were coming." My voice tried to form words and failed. I think there's been a mistake." The woman's gaze sharpened again. "Mistake or not, Miss Carter. She believes you're her mother." I lowered myself slowly, keeping my movements gentle, as if I was approaching a frightened animal. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, and heard the way my voice shook. "I'm Nora." The little girl blinked like she was trying to make sure I was real, then tightened her grip on the rabbit and whispered, "Mommy Nora." The sound of it punched the air out of me. I forced myself to smile, even as my throat constricted. "No, honey," I tried, and hated how weak it sounded. I couldn't finish. My tongue wouldn't cooperate with the truth. The administrator slid a folder onto the desk beside us and said, "Maybe this will answer some questions." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were school forms, emergency contacts, and a copy of a birth certificate. My name was there, printed cleanly as if it had always belonged in that box. Nora Hale, my phone number, my address, my vision tunneled. Then my eyes snagged on a faded photo tucked into the folder, me, with my arm around someone I hadn't seen in 4 years. Mia, my little sister, bright-eyed, stubborn, too trusting for her own good. The sister who had vanished at 22 after running off with a man I never liked. No calls, no social media, no trace. Seeing her face again felt like being stabbed with memory. "What do you mean she told you?" I demanded, my voice too sharp, too desperate. "Where is Mia now?" The administrator hesitated, and that hesitation was its own answer. We haven't seen her for weeks," she admitted. "Sophie has been picked up by different people. Sometimes late, sometimes not at all. When no one came today, we thought." Her eyes dropped briefly to the child. "We thought you abandoned her." A cold shiver ran down my spine, so sudden it made my teeth ache. "I would never abandon a child," I snapped, and immediately hated myself when Sophie flinched. I softened my tone at once, forcing calm into my voice as I turned back to her. Hey, sweetheart, I'm not mad at you, I promise." She stared up at me with the same familiar gaze Mia used to have when she was scared, and my heart twisted violently. "Do you have her home address?" I asked the administrator, already knowing I wouldn't leave without it. "Yes," she said carefully, "but it's in a very run-down area, not safe after dark." I didn't even blink. "I don't care." My voice sounded like someone else's, harder, older. The woman hesitated, then wrote an address on a sticky note and pressed it into my hand like she was handing me a warning. I scooped Sophie into my arms. She simply rested her head on my shoulder as if she'd done it 1,000 times, and that broke something in me so cleanly it almost hurt to breathe. Outside, the cold air hit my face again, sharper this time, as if the night itself knew where I was going. I strapped Sophie into the back seat, buckling her in carefully while her rabbit watched from her lap. "Sweetheart," I asked as I slid into the driver's seat, hands shaking against the steering wheel, "do you know where Mommy Mia is?" Sophie hugged the rabbit tighter and murmured, so quietly I almost didn't hear her. "Mommy's sleeping. She's been sleeping a long time." The blood in my veins turned to ice. I started the engine, and the moment the car rolled forward, I knew with terrifying clarity that whatever waited at that address wasn't going to be a misunderstanding. It was going to be the answer to where my sister had gone and why she'd left a child behind with my name like a lifeline. The GPS led us deeper into Seattle, farther from anything that felt familiar, as if the city itself was peeling away its safer layers. Streetlights grew sparse and sickly, flickering like they were tired of trying. Buildings sagged under their own neglect, windows boarded or shattered, graffiti crawling across brick like scars that never healed. Sophie watched silently from the back seat, hugging her rabbit so tightly it seemed strained, her small body rigid with a fear she didn't yet have words for. "Is this your neighborhood, sweetheart?" I asked softly, already dreading the answer. She nodded once, barely moving, her eyes fixed on the passing darkness. By the time I turned onto the final street, my hands were trembling so badly I had to force them steady on the wheel, my pulse roaring in my ears like a warning siren. The houses weren't really houses anymore, just tired structures slumped against one another, wrapped in rusted metal and peeling paint, porches sagging like broken teeth. Sophie lifted a tiny finger and pointed. "That one," she whispered. The porch light was broken, the doorway crooked, the entire place leaning as if it wanted to collapse and be done with it. Every instinct screamed for me to turn around, to protect the child in my car from whatever lived behind that door. But Mia might be inside, and I had already lost her once. I stepped out into the cold, lifted Sophie into my arms, and pushed the door open. It didn't creak. It moaned, low and mournful, like the house itself was begging me to leave. The smell hit first: dampness, mold, rotten food, old alcohol, the stench of a place where suffering had soaked into the walls. Sophie tightened her grip around my neck and whispered, "Mommy." The sound broke my heart clean in half. I turned on my phone's flashlight and stepped deeper inside, my voice echoing thin and fragile when I called, "Mia, it's Nora. Are you here?" No answer came, just a heavy, suffocating silence that pressed against my chest until breathing felt optional. I moved slowly through the narrow hallway, past overturned chairs and broken glass, until I reached the living room, and everything inside me shattered. Mia was lying on the floor beneath a collapsed shelf, her body curled at an angle that made my stomach lurch. Her skin was pale, lips tinged blue, bruises blooming across her arms, legs, even her neck in sickening shades of purple and yellow. "Mia," I whispered, my voice breaking apart. Sophie slid from my arms and dropped to her knees beside her mother, shaking her gently with trembling hands. "Mommy, wake up," she cried, her voice small and desperate. "I brought Mommy, Nora. Please wake up." I rushed forward, kneeling, my hands shaking uncontrollably as I checked Mia's neck, a pulse faint, fragile, barely there, but present. Relief and terror collided so violently I nearly collapsed. "Oh God," I sobbed, brushing hair from Mia's face. "What did they do to you?" Around us, the room told its own story. Shattered glass glittering on the floor, holes punched into the walls, furniture overturned like the aftermath of a storm that never moved on. One name rose unbidden in my mind, heavy and poisonous: Derek. I scooped Mia into my arms, shocked by how light she was, how much she felt like a child instead of my grown sister. Sophie clutched my sleeve, sobbing. "Don't let her sleep," she begged. "Please don't let her sleep." "I won't," I promised fiercely, even as fear clawed up my throat. "She's coming with us. Right now." I carried Mia out into the night, Sophie running beside me, her cries echoing off the empty street. I laid Mia across the back seat, wrapping my jacket around her, though her skin still felt frighteningly cold. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might tear itself free as I started the engine and sped away, the broken house shrinking in the rearview mirror. "Mommy, Nora," Sophie whispered, her voice shaking. "Is Mommy Mia going to die?" I swallowed hard, forcing strength into my words. "No, sweetheart, I won't let anything happen to her." I didn't know if that was a promise or a prayer. The hospital doors slid open as I burst inside, shouting for help. Carrying Mia like she was already slipping away, nurses rushed toward us, voices overlapping, hands reaching. "Possible domestic violence," one muttered. "Trauma room 3, another ordered. They took her from my arms, laying her gently on a stretcher, and for a moment I stood there uselessly. My arms empty, chest aching like something vital had been removed. A nurse touched my shoulder and told me they needed space. "Please," I whispered, my voice cracking. "She's my sister. Please take care of her." She nodded, her expression softening. "We'll do everything we can." I sat in the hallway holding Sophie as fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, relentless and cold. Her small body curled into mine, fingers gripping my shirt like she was afraid I might disappear too. "Mommy Nora," she whispered, barely audible. "Mommy Mia hurts a lot." I pressed my lips to her hair, my own tears falling silently. "I know," I said. "But we're going to help her. I promise." Minutes stretched into an hour, each second dragging like it weighed 1,000 pounds. When the doctor finally approached, his tired eyes told me everything before he spoke, and my heart hammered as I stood, bracing myself for the truth. The doctor stopped a few feet in front of me, his posture careful in the way people are when they're about to change someone's life with a sentence. "Miss Hale?" he asked quietly. I nodded, my throat too tight to answer. "Your sister is stable for now," he said, emphasizing the words as if to brace me for what followed. "She's severely malnourished and dehydrated, and she has multiple fractures. Some are recent, some are older. Without intervention tonight, she may not have survived another day." The hallway seemed to tilt, the sound of his voice fading into a dull roar. Sophie whimpered softly against my chest, and I held her tighter, my jaw clenched so hard it hurt. "Can we see her?" I asked, forcing the words out. He nodded gently. one guardian at a time. She's still unconscious. The sight of Mia in the hospital bed nearly broke me. Tubes and wires framed her fragile body, monitors beeping softly like they were afraid to disturb her. Her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, her skin too thin, too pale, as if life itself had been stretched to its limit. I sat beside her and took her hand, surprised by how cold it still felt. "I'm here," I whispered, tears blurring my vision. "I found you. I'm not letting anything happen to you again." For a moment, nothing changed. Then her fingers twitched faintly against mine, and my breath caught. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and heavy with pain, until they found my face. "Nora," she breathed, barely louder than air. "I'm here," I said quickly, leaning closer. "You're safe." Her gaze drifted past me to where Sophie stood hesitantly near the bed. The moment Mia saw her, something soft and raw broke through the pain. Sophie rushed forward, grabbing her mother's hand and pleading, "Mommy, don't sleep anymore." Mia lifted her hand with visible effort and brushed Sophie's cheek, her lips trembling as she whispered, "I'm okay, baby. Mommy's okay." It wasn't true, not really, but she said it for her child, and the love in that small gesture hurt more than any wound I'd seen that night. When the nurse stepped out, Mia turned her eyes back to me, tears gathering. "I never wanted you to see me like this," she said weakly. "I should have found you sooner," I replied, my voice breaking. "I should have never let you disappear." She shook her head slowly. "I left because I didn't want you dragged into my mess." "Mess," I whispered, anger and grief tangling together. "Someone did this to you." Her eyes closed briefly, and when she spoke again, the name landed like a curse. "Derek." Sophie flinched at the sound and pressed closer to her mother. Mia's voice trembled as she continued, words spilling out like they'd been trapped too long. She told me how she thought he loved her, how running away felt like freedom at first, how the first hit came wrapped in apologies and promises. She told me how he took her phone, her money, her friends, how fear became her daily companion. "He said if I ever left he'd find you," she whispered. "He said he'd kill anyone who tried to help me." I was so scared. I covered my mouth, shaking. "Why didn't you come home?" I sobbed. "I tried," she said, tears slipping down her temples. "When I got pregnant, I thought leaving would make things worse. I thought staying was the only way to keep everyone alive." She looked at Sophie, her expression breaking apart. "After she was born, I put your name on everything," she admitted softly. "School forms, clinic papers. I needed someone good to find her if something happened to me." Understanding hit me like a wave, stealing my breath. "That's why they called me," I murmured. "Because you trusted me," Mia nodded, her eyes pleading. "Please don't let him take her. Don't let him find us again." I leaned down carefully and wrapped my arms around her, holding her as gently as I could. "I won't," I vowed. "I swear to you, I will protect Sophie with my life." Mia stayed in the hospital for 3 days. I barely left her side, sleeping in a chair, waking at every beep of a monitor. Sophie curled against me at night, her rabbit tucked under her chin, nightmares flickering behind her closed eyes. When doctors finally cleared Mia for discharge, there was no question where she'd go. My apartment might have been small and plain, but it was safe, and safety was everything now. The first nights were quiet in a fragile way. Mia sleeping fitfully, Sophie following me from room to room, clinging like she needed proof I was real. I let myself believe, just for a moment, that we might have outrun the worst of it. Then, one rainy evening, the pounding started at my door. The sound wasn't just knocking, it was violent, explosive, like someone was trying to beat their way through the wood with pure rage. The first bang made Sophie scream, a sharp, terrified sound that cut straight through me. Mia went pale instantly, her body locking up as if every muscle remembered this rhythm. Then his voice followed, low and familiar, curling through the apartment like smoke. "Nora, open the damn door." I didn't need to see him to know it was Derek. My heart slammed so hard it felt like it might shatter my ribs from the inside. Mia grabbed the wall to steady herself, her breathing turning ragged. "He found us," she whispered, panic flooding her eyes. Oh God, he found us. I pressed a finger to my lips and forced my voice to stay steady as I leaned close to her. Take Sophie to the bedroom, I whispered urgently. Lock the door and don't open it no matter what happens. She hesitated, fear freezing her in place, until another blow shook the door and splintered the frame. Sophie burst into tears, and Mia scooped her up, disappearing down the hallway just as Derek slammed his fist against the door again. I know she's in there, he snarled. You think you can hide my family from me? Anger flared through my fear, hot and reckless. I stepped closer to the door, my hands shaking but my spine stiffening. She's not your property, I shouted back. You lost every right to them the moment you laid a hand on her. His laugh was cold, unhinged. Open the door or I'll kick it down. I grabbed my phone, my fingers slick with sweat. Touch that door again and I'm calling the police, I said, praying he couldn't hear how hard my heart was pounding. For a moment, silence fell, broken only by the rain hammering the metal railing outside. Then came the crash, his boot slamming into the lower panel hard enough to crack the wood. Sophie screamed again from the bedroom. That's it, I yelled, dialing. I'm calling 911, he spat back. Go ahead, police can't protect you forever. I'll get my family one way or another. And then, just as suddenly as he'd come, he ran. I heard his boots pounding down the stairwell, fading into nothing. I rushed to the bedroom and dropped to my knees beside Mia, who was curled around Sophie like a shield, shaking violently. He knows where we live, she whispered, terror hollowing her voice. He won't stop. I wrapped my arms around both of them, my own fear hardening into something sharper. We're not running anymore, I said quietly. Mia looked up at me, eyes wide and broken. He'll kill us, she said. Not if we end this, I replied, lifting my phone. We gather everything. Every bruise, every medical record, every witness. We take him to the police, and we make sure he never comes near you or Sophie again. The next morning, I woke before sunrise, with a knot of purpose tightening my chest. I'd never built a legal case, never confronted a violent man, but fear had already taken enough from us. We left Sophie with my neighbor, Mrs. Adler, who welcomed her with gentle smiles and cookies, unaware she was holding a child who'd survived a nightmare. Then Mia and I drove back to the street she'd escaped from, the place where her suffering had been hidden in plain sight. She couldn't bring herself to go inside the house, so I went alone, documenting everything, the broken furniture, the holes in the walls, the stains that told stories no one wanted to hear. Outside, Mia was speaking with an elderly woman from next door, her hands shaking as she listened. This is Mrs. Boyd, Mia murmured when I joined them. The woman's eyes burned with quiet fury as she gripped my hand. I heard her scream, she said. I saw what he did. I was afraid. But I won't be silent anymore. One by one. Others came forward, a plumber who'd seen Derek drag Mia inside by the hair, a teenager who remembered Sophie hiding when the yelling started. Each voice added weight, each memory turning Derek's lies into ash. At the clinic, Dr. Reyes handed us copies of old medical records, documented injuries that painted a pattern too clear to deny. When we left, Mia clutched the envelope to her chest and whispered, I thought I was invisible. I squeezed her hand. You weren't, I said. You were just waiting to be seen. By the time we pulled away, I knew this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about stopping a man who thought fear made him untouchable, and as I looked at my sister, bruised, terrified, but standing, I felt something fierce ignite in my chest. Derek Voss had started this war, but we were going to finish it. The morning of the hearing arrived, wrapped in cold air and sleepless nerves, the kind of day where even breathing felt deliberate. Mia stood beside me on the courthouse steps, her hands trembling despite the way I held them, her long sleeves pulled down to hide bruises that still felt too exposed to the world. Sophie clung to her other side, stuffed rabbit pressed to her chest like armor. I leaned close and murmured that she didn't have to speak if she couldn't. But Mia shook her head slowly, resolve flickering beneath the fear. I've stayed silent too long, she whispered. Inside the courthouse, whispers filled the hallway. Neighbors and strangers drawn to the gravity of a woman finally standing up to the man who nearly destroyed her. Then Derek appeared at the far end. Clean shirt, groomed hair, eyes still full of the same venom I'd heard at my door. Mia instinctively stepped behind me. I didn't move. Not this time. When the judge entered, the room stilled, and the prosecutor began laying out years of violence, coercion, and threats with a calm that made my stomach twist. Photos appeared on the screen: bruises, fractures, Mia on a hospital stretcher, barely conscious, and I heard a juror gasp softly. Witnesses followed. Mrs. Boyd's voice shook as she described hearing screams and being threatened into silence. Tom Rourke admitted he'd seen Mia crawling out of the house once, bleeding, and done nothing, regret cracking his voice. Derek scoffed when he took the stand, dismissing injuries as clumsiness, threats as things said in anger, until the prosecutor quietly asked if Sophie had been in danger the night he tried to break down my door. His silence rang louder than any denial. When Mia was called, her knees nearly buckled. But she lifted her chin and spoke anyway, her voice soft but unwavering as she told the truth she'd been carrying alone. She spoke of fear, of staying because leaving felt more dangerous, of watching her daughter learn to hide from anger. "I don't want revenge," she said, tears streaming. "I just want to stop being afraid." When the verdict came back guilty on all counts, the air shattered. Derek exploded, shouting promises of vengeance as officers dragged him away. But his words had lost their power. They echoed against walls that no longer belonged to him. Mia collapsed against me, sobbing, relief pouring out like a flood. And I held her as if letting go might undo everything we'd fought for. The weeks after felt unreal in their quiet. No fists pounding on doors, no whispered countdowns in the dark, just peace settling slowly into the corners of our lives. Mia healed in ways that weren't visible at first, her shoulders relaxing, her breath deepening. One afternoon she asked me to cut her hair, to shed the last pieces of him, and when she looked in the mirror afterward, she smiled through tears and said she looked like someone who survived. Sophie changed too, her steps lighter, her laughter louder. One evening I found her drawing 3 stick figures and labeling them Mommy Mia, Mommy Nora, and herself. When I asked why 2 mommies, she smiled and said one loved her and one protected her, and my heart nearly split with the weight of it. 6 months later, my small apartment gave way to a modest rental house with a tiny backyard and a bedroom. Sophie painted soft yellow herself. "No bad people," she declared, twirling through empty rooms. That night, after she slept, Mia leaned against me on the porch and whispered that she thought leaving home once meant freedom, only to find a prison instead. I told her she was strong for surviving long enough to be found. Later, standing in Sophie's doorway, watching her breathe easy for the first time, I understood the truth that had taken me all this time to learn. That phone call, the one that claimed I had a daughter, was the most terrifying moment of my life, but it led me to a family I never knew I needed. Sometimes, the thing that shatters your world is the very thing that rebuilds it. If this story moved you, take a moment to like, share, subscribe, and tell us in the comments what family means to you.